Good morning, MRS. I'd like to give my thanks to the organisers and send our apologies that we couldn't attend the conference in person this year. My name's Hua, and I'm a research coordinator in Andy Cooper's group at the University of Liverpool. I'll be presenting some work from Benjamin Berger, a PhD student working on mobile autonomous robots for materials discovery in our group, and David Marquez-Gamez, a theme lead for intelligent automation at the Leverhulme Centre, who is working on architectures for autonomous laboratories for physical sciences. So in this talk, I'd like to talk about the development of self-driving autonomous scientific labs that are powered by AI and robotics. So we have a vision for these labs, and that is that they should be cooperative. So different elements are interconnected and interoperable. That's to say that they can work together. They are heterogeneous, so they draw on diverse hardware and software assets. That could include existing scientific instruments, as well as new robotics and software. And finally, they need to be adaptive, so that the system is modular and it's dynamically reconfigurable, so that they can be used to address a wide range of scientific challenges. So I'd like to give a little bit of context for why we're doing this research. Now, 10 years ago in the field of robotics research, it was at the point where a lot of effort was being spent on the development of software frameworks or platforms. So a typical grad student might spend 70% of their time reinventing the wheel, so to speak. This is a couple of slides from the initial pitch deck for ROS, the robotic operating system. I was just showing the idea that by working together to build a general platform on which different researchers could work together, they could save a lot of time and really kind of accelerate research towards what they actually wanted to find, which was in this case the development of personal robotics. Now, as we start to automate physical science laboratories, we're also starting to reach this point. So in the robotics field, this ROS project was extremely successful, in part because it was modular, it was decentralized, it was collaborative, and it was open source. So a really large community rapidly sprung up. And so now ROS is basically the de facto standard middleware for orchestrating robotics research that involves heterogeneous robotics, for example. ROS has become so successful that packages have been made for a lot of specific fields, such as ROS Industrial for industrial robotics, ROS Agricultural for farming robotics, and recently ROS Health for the use of robotics in the hospital setting. So we believe that this existing framework might also provide a great basis for orchestrating laboratory robotics. Here's a schematic of a ROS architecture for laboratory robotics that's proposed by David Marquez-Gamez. So you can see the key aspect of this is that all of these different elements, the hardware control, decision controls and perception and so on, are modular and dynamically reconfigurable so that it can address many different problems. And in contrast to existing chemical automation approaches, a key element of this is the inclusion of a cobotic approach. So this is a concept used in industry where robots and humans can safely work together. And so you can imagine a case where in the scientific laboratories as well, it would be important for humans and robots to work together to achieve research aims. So to give an example of a workflow that is interconnected by this ROS platform for laboratories, you can see a hypothetical workflow where you want to prepare a sample using different kinds of dispensing and mixing, and then analyze them. So in this case, each individual instrument would have its own operations digitally controlled by ROS, so there would be drivers either developed by the manufacturers or in-house, and then these operations would be linked together perhaps by a static platform. So in our lab, we have this ABB Yumi robot, which is a twin-arm static platform. And the controls for this robot are actually available in the ROS industrial package. Now, to link all of these together with an analysis, you might then want a mobile robotic platform, such as this KUKA mobile robot with a mobile manipulator. This is another robot that we have, and again, the controls for this are available in ROS Industrial. So you can see how by drawing on existing well-tested modules, we're able to rapidly build a diverse and interconnected scientific lab. In this video, I'd like to show an example of a task that is made possible by ROS. So you can see this is a collaborative task involving heterogeneous robots. So these are robots from two different suppliers, and they need to communicate their position and timing to make this task of uncapping a valve and moving it possible. And this really shows the importance of having an underlying architecture in the connected lab. Okay, so now I'd like to give an example of the interconnected automation of lab tasks in a real-world setting. So this is work from Benjamin Berger's PhD on the development of an autonomous mobile robot scientist. And the aim of this project is to develop formulations for improving photocatalysts, that is the splitting of water to generate hydrogen. And this is actually a really complex multidimensional chemical space, which is very hard for a human to explore. The physical operations required for this project involve things such as solid and liquid dispensing, loading and unloading reactors, and also measurements which involve interaction with existing commercial equipment. So you can see here that the robot has to interact with the instrument by manually pressing a button in that case, because it hasn't been digitized. So to connect these operations, we then use a mobile robotic platform, in this case a KUKA mobile manipulator. So you can see in this video the KUKA robot moving between the different reaction stations and dispensing stations, as well as performing measurements. This kind of connected lab shows the importance of having an overall architecture which can communicate between the different elements. And in this case, the experiment is running autonomously. So the choice of each reaction is driven by the results of the previous reactions and optimized using Bayesian optimization. You can see that this robot is working continuously over a weekend, both night and day, and its testing rate is vastly higher than that of a human scientist. One thing to note is that this robot is running completely autonomously to test these hypotheses, but this type of robot setup could also be geared toward work with humans in a cobotic way. So what's actually happening in this autonomous workflow? Well, the robot is varying a really complex formulation space or chemical space containing 11 different components to optimize one parameter, which is hydrogen evolution as recorded by the measurement instrument. So you can see that as this experiment progresses, the robot rapidly finds better hydrogen evolution. And this is an extremely difficult experiment for a human to do manually, as it's such a large chemical space. You can also see how this might generalize to a wide range of different scientific challenges. So let's just make a comparison to a human researcher doing this experiment. So to do 1,000 experimental trials, a human researcher would need about 1,000 days, half a day to set up the reaction, and then the measurement could be running overnight. Of course, you'd have to take out weekends and holidays and all those kind of things. Now, if you wanted to do this in a semi-automated fashion, for example, with this ChemSpeed liquid dispensing platform, you could do this much faster, but it would still require around 5.5 days. Now, in this autonomous case that we demonstrated, only half a day of research time is needed to set up an experiment, after which the robot can simply run autonomously until it reaches some kind of conclusion. And this frees the researcher for a much more important task of understanding experimental results and then devising future research directions. I'm sure we can all agree that that is a really valuable aim. So I'd like to thank you all for listening to the talk, and I hope that's given you something to think about. Apologies again for not being able to attend the conference and take your questions, but if you'd like to find out more about our research, we'd be really happy to hear from you on Twitter or email, details on the left side. So thank you again, and an early happy Christmas from us and the robots in the Cooper group.